Hello, welcome to Camera Chat. Today we're going to be talking about the Canon R5 and the A7s III, two cameras that have been really overhyped this year. There's been a lot of buzz around both cameras, and there's been a lot of people, myself and my guest Billy included, that have been thinking, do we need the A7s III or the Canon R5? Which is better for us? Which is better for someone who's photography first, videography first, or someone that does, just a bit of both? So yeah, it's my pleasure to be joined by Billy today, who's a photographer and videographer from Virginia. Billy, thanks for joining us.
How's it going, Jack? It's great to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm good. So yeah, a few disclaimers up front. In the pre-chat before, so some of the comments on Facebook, people were saying, the A7s III it's not a hybrid camera. So I just want to dispel that right now. The A7s III is in a hybrid body, which is stills inspired. It has a mechanical shutter. It has dedicated photo options on the dials. So it's a hybrid camera. Whether it's good for both things in equal measure is another matter, but it's definitely a hybrid camera. They're both hybrid cameras. And I think they're at the top of the list, whether you're a photographer or videographer. So that out of the way. Also, I want to just add that me and Billy, we both like cameras from all brands, right? We don't have any loyalty towards Sony or Canon or anything. I've had cameras from 3 different manufacturers this year. I know Billy's used a number of cameras before. So that out of the way. Billy, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm based out of Virginia, kind of very close to DC. I do photography, headshots, real estate, brand promotion for video and audio production. Studied a lot of it, digital video and cinema from James Madison University, and currently working, like I said, out of the DC area, doing a lot of varying different kind of projects.
Tool. I just want to say I love your framing right off the front because you've got those nice leading lines there. It looks very cool.
I know, yeah, I'm trying. It took like 2 or 3 hours a few weeks ago to kind of figure out what I wanted to do in case I had to do a stream or something like this. So glad we kind of landed on something that was semi half YouTube-ish.
No, it looks cool. Is that an MC in the background as well?
Yeah, got an MC in the back here. Got a couple quasar lights, I think, on the bottom here. My 300D Mark II up in the front. Love them all.
I love those little MCs. I've got 2 either side of me, just giving me a bit of an accent. So
yeah.
let's dive straight into it. So the R5 was announced in July, right? Early July. And
Yep.
I remember there being quite a lot of buzz around it because, it was 8K. They announced it was 8K. It would be kind of, you get the oversampled 4K. Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of in a stills body. It was kind of everything that the original ESR was kind of hyped up to be, it seemed. And then you started to see kind of the first reviews coming in. So what was your thoughts when you saw the announcement and then the first reviews coming in?
Yeah, so I think I and a lot of Canon shooters were very excited and impressed. It was kind of the camera that we all wanted. It was going to be perfectly hybrid between, photo and video. It was going to have 8K. It was going to support RAW. It was going to be, one of the biggest things was the 4K was going to be full frame. It was going to have a lot more increased photo options and pro features, all in a very nice compact body that everyone from Canon definitely loves. So I put my pre-order in the minute it came out. I think everyone was super excited, and we were all thinking, oh, I saw a lot online, oh, the 8K is only going to be for time-lapse modes. I was like, yeah, I guess that kind of makes more sense. And then there was like the IBIS. I was like, man, I don't know how they're going to pack all of these features into one body, but it really seems like Canon's going to be taking the plunge into something to kind of compete with Sony. So I was really excited. I had kind of all my eggs in one basket for that camera. And when it came out, and I saw a lot of the overheating issues, I was like, oh my God, did I just make like the biggest mistake of my life? Like for photos, it's bar none. So fantastic camera, autofocus, everything is great. But like when I do a lot of video production, and it was going to be I thought it was going to be one of my main front runners for video alongside my EOS R, but I was really disappointed. I put some even posts out on Facebook like, I'm returning this. Like, this is almost criminal what Canon's doing right now to release a camera that's basically crippled. You can't even get through a shoot in most of the modes you'd want to shoot in without overheating. And a lot of things kind of came out. They released some firmware updates that kind of tweaked it a little bit, but I was kind of very upset with what they had done with that price bracket as well, especially when the A7S III was coming out so soon after. That's kind of what my opinion was of it when it came out.
Yeah, and I think that kind of speaks a little bit to Canon's error in the marketing of the R5, because like we both think it's a great camera, but they kind of marketed it as an 8K camera, and really when you're shooting in 8K, it's quite limited due to the recording limit and due to the overheating, right? So if they had just said, this is a 4K camera, and as like an added bonus you can do 8K, then I don't think there would have bene that much of a problem, right?
Yeah, it was very, like with Apple and the Pro HDR screen stand. It's kind of I think they made it as one of their main features rather it's just kind of like a specialty add-on. I think it would have been vastly different had they not included 8K and had like no overheating issues. Now, obviously, they've still got the what is it the terminology for
C17?
it. The Pro, the HDR, no, not HDR. It's the what is it? It's the 4K, the downsampled HQ.
Yeah.
I think that was the feature that most people are looking at at least my realm of the neighborhood. I would use that mode all the time, but just the fact that overheats was kind of just a little bit of a downturn. But I think if you're an EOS R5 user, it's almost necessary that you use something like a Ninja V or an external recorder because it vastly increases the usability of it, at least on a day-to-day shoot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen because I'm an A7S III owner, obviously, and I'm happy with the video quality. But I've seen some tests of the oversampled. Is it called 4K HQ? Is that what they call it? The oversampled?
4K HQ.
Yeah, I've seen samples of that, and yeah, it looks incredible. And I just think if they could have done that without the overheating, then it would have really blown everything else out the water. Like, because with the A7S III, the 4K is decent, but because it's just a 12 megapixel sensor, there's no oversampling. So when you do crop into that 4K on like 150%, like it's passable, but it doesn't look amazing. Like, but on the R5, you do that, and it looks great, right?
Yeah, the oversampled 4K is probably my most sought after mode to shoot in. It's incredibly sharp. The detail is amazing. There's really it's, as a few YouTubers and other people that I've seen online, it's the best 4K, definitely out of a mirrorless camera, I think there is on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And David said that his favorite feature is the autofocus. How have you found that?
Yeah, the autofocus, I was extreme, especially coming from an EOS R. For photography, when I first took it out, it is rock solid. It is very sticky, even pretty far away. When I was doing a exercise shoot and they're doing exercises maybe 15, 20 feet away, it's still locking right on that eye. Even in low light, I've shot weddings with it and it's extremely sticky. I've very rarely had any issues to where it kind of misses or throws focus out of whack. It just really depends on what focus mode you're using. And I think Canon does a really good job of making the features and autofocus modes easy to navigate.
Absolutely. And I think before, kind of Canon was always the leader in autofocus, right? But now I think Sony's kind of caught up, and they're kind of like much the same. I think they both do an amazing job. They both have the eye tracking, they both have subject tracking and everything like that. And in terms of, like, you said that you'd want kind of that oversampled 4K to be improved. If you had like a list of like a few things that you really want to see them, things they could improve via firmware that you'd like to see them improve so far.
For sure. I don't know about firmware. I think all of us would love to see the overheating dropped more, but I think like with what is it? I usually ran off of No Life Digital's chart. I don't know if any of the other R5 users have used it, but he put out this chart of like the recording times that he had gotten using internal recording, external recording, and he got some pretty good results with it. I haven't run into too many overheating issues actually using my external recorder. Maybe once, sometimes if I'm doing like a long stream and I'm streaming in like 4K HQ. But if I had to list like a few things that would have really made this camera kind of perfect, I would have said Obviously, no overheating issues in 4K HQ. No recording limit. I think that's ridiculous for a body like this and at that price range, especially if the A7S III is doing it. I think that's really just such an old feature and limit that isn't really needed anymore. That was a huge downturn for me. I think that would be pretty much it. Like the autofocus is rock solid. The IBIS is rock solid. It's got a fantastic flip out screen. It feels great in the hand. Battery life is really nice. I think it's really just like the overheating and some of the dynamic range I think could be just a little bit better as well. I think that's kind of really what this camera was missing. But other than that, like it's been rock solid. Like the photo capabilities are second to none. I have not had a better experience shooting photos with it. It has extremely good low light capability in photo mode. The way the processor resolves noise is night and day. But in terms of video, I think there's a couple of things that are left to be desired. Oh, another thing was the SD cards. I think what Sony did with the A7S III was so different. Like no one kind of was really expecting that. I didn't even think that that would be something that could be done. But just the fact that they can, innovate that way. I think Sony is like by far the better innovator. And it's like when I'm shooting photos or video, I want to be able to back up my recordings to another card slot. That's like the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have cards with different sizes or different, obviously, speeds, you can't do that. So I'm like, that kind of defeats the entire purpose of having two card slots. You want to be able to have dual recording or have proxy recording, and you just can't really do a lot of these things on the R5. And I see, there's a comment, does it have full HDMI? No, it doesn't. That was another thing that a lot of people were really kind of not upset, but it was just kind of like, really? Like, why? They have, I want to say it's micro HDMI, and at least on my EOS R, it's a mini HDMI, which is at least a little better. But I think, like you said, full HDMI would have been better. I don't know the specifics of how they go into designing it, what limitations they have, but that would have definitely been nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, especially in 2020, originally the record limit on cameras was there due to some kind of obscure rule in the European Union, I believe. I probably should know more about this, being British, but it's to do with the categorization of the camera, right? So if it records over 30 limits, then it's classed as a video camera, and there's more tax to pay for that, right? But that's since
they were worried about people recording in, I want to say it was movie theaters. They didn't want it to be easy enough for people to take a small little mirrorless camera into a movie theater and record for indefinitely.
Right, so that's the actual the origin to that rule coming in.
I want to say it is, yeah.
Okay, cool. But anyway, I think that was abolished in 2019, maybe even 2018. So it's not something that should be present in cameras at the moment. So I think that kind of felt a little bit like Canon was, people say they cripple their cameras, but that felt like it was really, that's not something we should be having in 2020.
I agree.
Cool. So we've gone over the Canon R5 and our thoughts on that. Let's look at the A7S III now. So that was announced. That was announced in late July, I think. So it was pretty much, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks after the R5. Yeah, and it was announced, and it was just it was just a 4K camera. It was 4K. It did 120p, similar to the Canon R5. And on paper, it didn't have the flashy spec. It didn't have 8K. It didn't have oversampled 4K because it was just 12 megapixels. But I think people were a little bit disappointed after the Canon R5 was announced with 8K and everything like that. But I think when it arrived, kind of that changed, because when the Canon R5 arrived, everyone was kind of a bit disappointed, just because I don't think it's a bad camera, nor do you, but I think because it was hyped up so much and it arrived and it couldn't live up to the hype, that was the problem. Whereas Sony was, I think, a little bit more conservative with their specs, and just said, let's just make this the best 4K camera we can. So when the reviews came in, it was very much like, this just shoots 4K, but it does it very well. It doesn't overheat. I think there was a few people that managed to get it to overheat in certain circumstances, but
Yeah, nothing to worry about.
yeah, I think, and Sony just kind of played it safe, which is not what they usually do. Usually they're the ones that kind of putting in the crazy specs, and it was quite interesting to see Sony kind of just being a bit more conservative, just saying, okay, let's keep it 12 megapixels, let's just make it a really good 4K camera. So that was my kind of reaction at the start was disappointment, but then when the first reviews came in, I was like, okay, this seems perfect for what I do, because I'm a videographer that does a little bit of photo. So I was like, okay, that makes sense for me. What was your reaction when you saw the A7S III announcement and then the first reviews coming in?
For sure. I think what Sony did and what Sony does really well is they give people the things that they actually want. No one wanted 8K. Why the heck would you want 8K? Most cinema cameras, not even all of them are shooting 8K. There's no need for it. Your monitor can't even display 8K. And Sony just like kind of, they gave us what we wanted. They gave us no overheating, which was, I would say, kind of let them have it. They wanted full HDMI. They wanted a flip out screen. They wanted 10-bit 422 4K 60. They wanted slow motion with, audio. A lot of those things they wanted IBIS in it. They wanted really good low light performance. I think their market, those are the things that their market wanted and their market was asking for, and they just do a lot better job of kind of going past, extending the bar even greater. They really listened to their audience really well. So I was really impressed, and they even had like the SD card slots, a little bit of wow factor. But I think that, like I said, they just gave everyone kind of what they wanted. No over the top specs that just aren't really going to be used that much.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my main reaction as well. It was kind of, it doesn't give me anything more, but it gives me everything I need, basically. So, exactly. I mean, if we're going to be like nitpicky, then maybe like it would be nice to have a 6K sensor that was oversampled to 4K. Yeah. But I think at the moment, like we're just spoilt for choice with cameras, so we're just kind of left to kind of nitpick at these things that could be improved, when really like a lot of the cameras this year have just been incredible. So in terms of favorite A7S features, Cognition says better menus. So yeah, I'm not sure how they compare to the R5, but I can just say compared to like old Sony menus, they're a lot better. Sony menus were kind of notorious for being these kind of labyrinths of really convoluted different options that you had to go through just to get the basic options, really. And I think this time Sony kind of really, like you said, they listen to the users, and that the menus are they're really easy to use. They're fully touch operational. And if you're a Canon user, you might be saying, yeah, well, of course they are. But for so long, Sony menus couldn't be operated via touch, which just seems mad. So neither company has a good record with kind of listening to their users that much. And yeah, Cognition says again, the dual ST and CF Express Type A cards. Yeah, I love that feature. I haven't used the CF Express Type A just because they're so bloody expensive. But I use the SD.
Yeah, I almost cried a little bit when I saw the price for the single CF Express Type B. I was like, oh my god! Like it's just fix up the camera.
It's one of those things in videography and photography that just seems like it doesn't. Why does it have to be that expensive? It doesn't really ring true that you pay thousands of pounds, thousands of dollars for a camera, and you kind of think, okay, yeah, a lot of research and development went into this. The build quality is great. I can kind of get behind this. But when you're shooting and you have to spend like, I think the CF Express Type A cards, I think they're like 500 to 800 depending on the capacity you get. And even if you get the highest capacity, I think it's only 200 and something gigabytes, the highest capacity one at the moment, which is not
maybe
for the Type A. I mean, the Type B, I think you can get slightly bigger ones. But yeah, it's something that shouldn't be that expensive, but it is really expensive. Cognition says 108 gigabytes. Yeah, I knew it was close to 200. But yeah, that's mad. And I think those are like 500 to like 800 pounds, right? Dollars for those 180 gigabyte cards. It just seems like there should be a way to kind of shoot those kind of higher specs and the kind of like the all eye compression without spending like an arm and a leg on storage.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that, you know, as technology grows and we get into more pro features, when you get when I recommend cameras and things to a lot of other people, it's not just the camera. When you increase the camera, you increase the price of everything else. You increase the price of the batteries, the SD cards, the gear you're going to mount it to, the lenses. Like, it's all a compounded cost. So, you know, you think, oh, I can spend $5,000 on this cinema camera, and then what are you going to have left in the budget for kind of everything else that you're doing? And the camera isn't even those costs too. You need to have good audio and things like that too. So it's kind of, I think they did a good job of pricing their products for what people, like I said, really need.
Yeah, and because when I was looking for a camera to buy, I was also considering the C300 Mark III, the new one that was announced this year. And I kind of priced it up, and I was like, okay, the camera's like, is it like 11,000 or something like that?
Yeah, it's about 10 or 11,000.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, I think I can afford that. But then I kind of priced in the lenses, like you said, and the CF Express Type B cards, and like everything, and the extra batteries, and yeah, it adds up so quickly. So really, at the end of the day, you need to kind of price in a few extra $1,000 to get everything you need to kind of actually shoot.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a little bit of fun here. We've got a little scorecard up here. And let me just reposition those. And so we're going to go through each kind of topic and just discuss which camera we think does better for these different topics. Let me just rearrange those. Cool. So firstly, we're going to talk about handling and usability. So Billy, I'm going to throw it over to you first. How have you found the R5 for kind of hand holding, kind of the button selection, the dials, and kind of the ergonomics? How have you found it?
It's been great. I think Canon is really well known for their cameras and how well they feel in the hand. It feels fantastic in the hand. It's really nice and beefy. It's got some weight to it. The menus are kind of everywhere. I would like them to be. The only thing I would say is I would have liked maybe one or two more custom button features, or at least a couple more in the menu. There's only 3 custom set modes. And for me, like, I do multiple different variations of video, multiple different variations of photos. So I would have maybe liked to see 5 custom set presets for each, maybe.
Yeah, and do you have a dedicated... is it S and F on Canon? You know, the slow and fast. Do you have a dedicated dial for that on the...
I don't believe so. I think the only way that you would be able to do it is by setting a preset custom mode, or I don't know, maybe you could set a custom preset button to it, but I normally don't. But that would be a nice feature to have, actually, now that I think about it, for when I'm on a different kind of shoots, just to be able to switch through. But so many times I'm so scared that I don't know what the settings are for some of the custom features. So I'm like, oh, well, I need to make sure this one has log, and I need to make sure that it's set to 10-bit. I need to make sure that the audio levels are set for this one. So I'm kind of just like nervous about that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, speaking on the A7s III side, I'm really happy with how it feels. Previously, just got a comment up there. Sorry about that. Previously my favorite camera for kind of handheld shooting was the GH5, because that feels so good in the hand, and it had amazing stabilization, just felt really good. But since I got the A7s III, like, that just feels really good in the hand. Previous Sony cameras have had a slightly shallower grip, so they're not quite as nice to hold.
Didn't they like buff the grip out a little bit?
Yeah, so the A7 III, and the kind of the previous generation had a bit more of a shallow grip, but the A7s III has a nice big grip, and it's got a weight to it that feels just right for me. I've got quite big hands, so it's good to have something to grip onto like that. In terms of like custom buttons, it's got more than enough custom buttons for everything I need. A slight plus over the R5 from what you're saying is it has a dedicated dial on the control wheel for slow motion, for S and Q mode, so that's good. And it's a little bit more blocky, right? So the R5 has more of a rounded feel to it. So I think it just depends on kind of what you like, but I think we're going to give this one to A7S III just for the extra S&Q mode dial we have there. So
yeah, I'd say probably like custom button menus and things like that. I would probably go A7S III. In terms of like hand holding, I haven't really held the A7S III too much, but I would probably give that to R5. But yeah, I think the menu Sony did a lot better job with that.
Let's give it a 1 each. So we're drawing out the bat. Okay, so second feature, video quality and capabilities. Again, Billy, hand over to you and just tell me what you think about the video quality and the capabilities.
For sure. I think Canon would probably take the lead in terms of raw, not in terms of like raw recording, but in terms of...
but it does have that.
yeah, raw capability. I think the 4K HQ mode is far superior to anything that it could be really compared against in its weight class. But I think just in terms of general quality usability, I'd probably give that to definitely the A7S III, especially because of its low light capability. And they did a lot better job with the color science. So that was kind of one of the main reasons people kind of didn't want to go Sony. But in terms of like straight video quality in general use, A7S III, but in terms of maximum quality and bit rate and things like that, I would probably go R5.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing because even though the A7S III is more specialized for video, if Canon had made their 8K and their 8K oversampled, the 4K HQ, if they'd made that usable, then I think we probably would have been given this to the R5, right?
Yep. I think that would be a different story, yep.
Which is kind of, so the R5 has the capability to be a better video camera, I think, but because of the overheating, because of the record limit, which is a big thing as well for videographers, a lot of the time I'm recording interviews, so I want to be able to just leave it running and not have to think about, okay, after half an hour I'm gonna have to go and press record. It's yeah, so I mean the R5 is not a bad video camera, but in terms of like who wins for video capabilities and video quality, we're going to give it to the A7S III, which shouldn't surprise people, but there you go. Okay, so let me just check my notes if my phone will let me in. So the third category is photo quality and capabilities in photo. So Billy, how are the photo capabilities on the R5, and do you think it's a really good camera for those that do photography first?
Absolutely. I think the R5 is probably the best photo camera out at the moment for generalized photography. It's got extremely diverse modes to kind of meet the needs of anyone using it for photo. I've used it with different flashes. It turns out fantastic. It's got a great body that can handle a lot of weather sealing. The different modes and capabilities that it has, the way it handles low light, the way I want to say it's got a 20 frame per second electronic shutter, which has been fantastic.
Yeah, that's mad.
Almost fluid raw video at 20 frames, but that's been fantastic for different wedding scenarios, and the autofocus on it has been rock solid, and especially for real estate photography. The different bracketing methods that you can use and the color science just with Canon straight out of camera has been really, really a nice thing to use. So I think for photo, obviously with the higher megapixel count that isn't too high, but it's kind of right in the middle, I think that definitely gives Canon users the edge. I think it was more designed to be a 5D Mark IV successor.
Yeah, and speaking of just your kind of use case, do you use kind of, because you've got the 45 megapixel, do you use that kind of reframing a lot? Do you kind of punch in your photos? Is that something you do regularly?
It depends. I would say usually not, just because I'm doing so much work all the time. I try and get it right in camera. The only time I ever usually will crop in a bit is for more creative purposes, not so much for the actual, like, to have like different quality, I guess, for the most part. I'll usually do it for like headshots. I'll usually take my headshots a little bit wider than I'd like, so I can kind of crop it and compose it however I like, and really have no issues with that. Especially with real estate, if there's a detail, you kind of shoot real estate super wide most of the time using those 15 to 35 lenses. But if you need to like crop in on like a small detail, if a client wants that, you have that capability to do it, and it still looks tack sharp.
Absolutely. So I think we've established that the R5 is a a quality photo camera with that 45 megapixel sensor. Like you said, the 20 frames per second raw photo ability is incredible. I'll just talk briefly about the A7s III photo capabilities. And I was actually surprised reading some of the comments on Facebook when I was kind of promoting this video. People kind of thought that the A7s III couldn't take good photos, that the photos are not worth using if they're only 12 megapixels. And I've just got to say respectfully, I think you're wrong, because a lot of the work I do is video first, but I have some clients that require photography as well, and also kind of just for personal things, using photo for kind of social media, things like that. And like, whether you're a photographer or videographer, correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, but like a lot of the time you're delivering for web, so social media photos, 12 megapixels I think is more than enough. And I think the quality of the photos out of the A7s III are really good. Like, obviously it's more of a video centric camera, but it's still a hybrid, and I still think the photos look really good. Obviously you don't quite have the same freedom to reframe that you have on the R5, because you've only got 12 megapixels. So as soon as you kind of start to punch in a little bit, you can really see that quality degradation there. But I don't think it's a bad camera for photos. I don't think that if you get the A7s III, you should be thinking, I can't take good photos on this camera. And I had someone suggesting in the comments that 12 megapixel, you can't take pro photos on a 12 megapixel camera. And my argument is that megapixels don't make a good photo. You've had
thank you.
Yeah, there's countless examples of pro photographers using cheap cameras, using like old film cameras. Annie Leibovitz has used kind of like iPhones. She's used cameras with like technically low megapixel counts. Steve McQueen, the director and photographer, he's used kind of like really old scrappy cameras, but the images look amazing. So just to kind of say that up front, megapixels don't make a good photo. And I think you're more of a photographer, so maybe you can kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I do not think that megapixels are the end-all be-all. A lot of the time, it comes down to the quality of the pixels, not solely the number. The number is just how many there are in the resolution, but that all depends on what you're viewing it on. So unless you're needing to do a lot of punching in, which I don't really see a lot of people needing to do if you just get it right in camera, you absolutely don't need more than 12 megapixels. That's kind of ridiculous. And in my sense, I think a lot of beginners, like you said, kind of get locked off to the idea that, oh, more megapixels equals better quality. But at that point, I saw that they're coming out with, what is it, the R5S, I want to say. It's
that's the rumored one, right?
Yeah, 90 megapixels, like that. That's insane. Like, why? That's just going to be taking, it's with video and photo, it's a constant balance of data and storage. So the more data you have per photo, that's just going to eat storage, and half the time I never use it. Most of the modes I use for my real estate photography, since I'm taking 5 bracketed image, I knock that quality down to C-RAW. Like, there's no point in recording all of that data for something I'm never going to really need to use. So I think for someone that needs video first and a little bit of photography here and there, it's still a very expensive camera. That thing is going to do more. It's going to do everything you're going to really need to do. If you're doing weddings and stuff and need more specific photo, yeah, like more megapixels isn't going to hurt, but it's definitely not going to make or break a photo. A lot of the RE cameras for video are shooting they don't even shoot 4K, but it's the quality of the pixels that more matters. And I think a lot of people kind of miss that, since it's kind of harder to see. They don't really have a rating for like a quantitative way of measuring pixel quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well worth mentioning that I haven't seen in a lot of the discussions is that the A7s III, because it's a full frame sensor with 12 megapixels, the actual pixels are bigger. So, or the photo sites are bigger, sorry. So it means that it's gathering more light. So actually, if you're doing low light photography without lighting, without flash, then the A7s III might be a better option. But I don't think it's any surprise. Before we give the point out, I'm just going to say David's comment says, my mentor in high school was shooting campaigns with an 8 megapixel camera, the EOS 1D Mark II N. I don't know if that ends.
Absolutely. You know, people made do years ago. Look at what they had. They didn't have near the quality or the specs that we have now, and they were making stuff that is just uncomparable to kind of what we have today. So it's not all about the specs. Specs are nice. I would really kind of urge people to develop their knowledge base in terms of like how to properly light. I think lighting absolutely makes or breaks a photo in terms of like that in the composition. If you can learn good lighting, you can light up those pixels. Any pixel is going to look really good in good lighting.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that speaks to kind of, I really like what you said, that kind of the specs don't make a camera, and that applies to photo and video. Quite a lot of the time, and I know I get wrapped up in specs a lot of the time and discussing it because it's fun and we're camera nerds. That's what we love to do. Wow. But yeah, like really the camera is not really, it's going to give you more options maybe, but it's not going to make you a better videographer or photographer. That, like you said, it's much more worth investing in learning about composition, lighting, sound, framing. Those things are going to make way more difference than the camera that you've got or the specs that it's got. If you feel limited by your camera, then you've got bigger problems than the camera that you're shooting on.
Yep. There was a video on YouTube with some guy. There was some video of some guy on YouTube. I forget what the channel was, but it said, you know, make your camera look 10 times better. And I was like, really? Like in the thumbnail looked really nice. I was like, oh, interesting. So he had this like little dinky, like $500 like T3i or something like that. And the image quality looked horrible out of the start because he had he didn't do anything yet. But he's like, you know, get your white balance right. Make sure your focus is right. Make sure you have nice quality lights set up in front of you. Make sure you have some good accent lights. Make sure, you know, you don't have your sharpening all the way up and things like that. And the image looked great. I was extremely shocked. And that really kind of opened it up to me that lighting is what kind of makes or breaks an image rather than, you know, just the straight quality of that image.
On mute. Absolutely. And I think we will wrap up this photography segment soon, but it's kind of opened up a really interesting discussion, I think. And yeah, I see people posting stuff online on kind of like the original Blackmagic pocket camera, which was just 1080 and is like 5 years old now or something, maybe more. And that looks great. And also people shooting like incredible photos on their phone, which I know phones have got some crazy processing going on as well, especially with Apple's phones and Google Pixel phones. But essentially their sensor is absolutely tiny, and you don't really have any control over depth of field unless you're using the kind of the what they call portrait effects things, which they don't look very good. Like they're getting better, but they're not quite there. But you've got so many limitations with like a smartphone or even like a Micro Four Thirds camera, and people do great work with it. So yeah, I think that's a really good message to leave people with on the photography side, that the camera shouldn't limit you because you can do good work whatever camera you're filming on. But to wrap things up, I don't think it's any surprise we're going to give the point to the R5 for photography due to the fact that it has that 45 megapixel sensor. And yeah, you've got that room to recrop. You've just got more options, but they can both take great photos, similar to how we said with the R5. That can take good video as well.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I put my phone down somewhere with my notes and I can't find it.
Yeah, one of my favorite conversations online was someone trying to tell me that you know, phone cameras are superseding, you know, dedicated SLR cameras, and that was an interesting education session right there.
Yeah, they're definitely not. So yeah, it's not like a zero-sum game though, is it? So it's not like either phones or cameras are better and you can take better photos on either of them. Like I think for a very long time, I think a dedicated camera is going to be better than a phone, just for the options that it gives you. But that's not to say that you can't take good photos on a phone. It's just you have less options, right?
Yeah, it's dedicated. It's made for it.
Cool. Okay, so the next topic we're discussing is low light performance. So, again, Billy, I'm going to throw over to you. Have you used the phone much? Sorry, phone. Have you used the camera much in low light, and how have you found it?
Absolutely. Weddings, a few other kind of low lit performance. I will say for the R5, it performs a lot better for photos in low light than it does video. Uh, a lot of low light performance comes down to how you light it and what your settings are in terms of if you're shooting log or things like that, if you need to overexpose it by a certain amount. But I think it's no surprise that the A7S III is going to outshine it in low light performance just because of that low megapixel count sensor. It does nice in low light, definitely does a lot better than its predecessor, the EOS R. But it's definitely usable depending on how you light it. I wouldn't go into like a dark or low lit room with it without using some denoising software. But it's definitely usable. It's definitely usable.
Yeah, I think most of the modern cameras these days are decent in low light. Even stuff like the Micro Four Thirds cameras, the GH5S. They announced that camera that is using a Micro Four Thirds sensor. If people don't know, you've got full frame sensors, then like APS-C, then Micro Four Thirds, and then phone cameras are like this tiny. But yeah, exactly. But even on like, there's certain things you could do to kind of to overcome those limitations. So like on the GH5S, they use a Micro Four Thirds sensor, which is quite small, but I think it's only 10 megapixels. So it means that it's kind of, like I said, the photo sites on that sensor are bigger, so it's collecting more light. So there's certain things you can do to overcome that. So yeah, R5 decent in low light, but it should become as no surprise that the A7S III is amazing in low light. It's got a 12 megapixel sensor, which spread out over a full frame sensor, means that it's collecting a lot of light on that small sensor. A lot of light on that small megapixel sensor. So it collects a massive amount of light, and it means that you can really push the camera up to those high ISOs without seeing. You do see noise, but it's kind of you can process that noise and you can kind of get rid of it. I will say that if you push it too high, it's going to need a lot of noise reduction. So even though technically it is the better low light camera, I still wouldn't want to be using cameras at high ISOs unless I absolutely had to. Like for my work, mostly I'm doing kind of lit corporate commercial stuff, so I don't have to use those low light capabilities. But we actually had a discussion on the first episode of Camera Chat where we had someone that shoots like documentary stuff, and he was saying, really, like if you're worrying about that high noise in the high ISOs, then that's basically not what you should be focusing on. So he was basically saying, if you're doing a documentary and you're trying to capture a moment, having that extra capability to crank the ISO is amazing. And if that means you get the shot rather than miss it, then it's worth it. So yeah,
absolutely. I'd love to see the technology developed more with Canon, because I know the S3, I want to say Gerald Undone kind of figure this out more specifically. But a lot of their cameras, a lot of the more video cameras are coming out now that have a dual native ISO. And I think that's actually a really, really nice feature that are coming out more on the cinema camera lines. And I think that was a great thing for them to incorporate to help out with those higher ISOs. It just takes me back to my first Nikon D5500 shooting video. I couldn't even go above ISO 400 without having incredible noise. So I think that is the dual gain output of this.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I think that kind of speaks to, thanks for that historical context, because it really speaks to how spoilt for choice we are with cameras at the moment. Like we're kind of nitpicking on a certain camera goes over a certain like 100,000 ISO or whatever. But like you said, not that long ago, we were limited to kind of like ISO in the hundreds, basically, without it looking terrible. So yeah, we're spoilt for choice. But similar to our last category, it shouldn't be any surprise that the Sony A7s III wins in low light performance. So next we're going to talk about, sorry, go on.
No, I said absolutely. Yep.
So next we're going to move on to autofocus. This should be an interesting one. Billy, how is the autofocus on the R5? What is it good at? What is it not good at? And would you like to see certain things improved?
For sure. I think Canon has been a long time runner in the autofocus game with their dual. What is it? No, it's not dual. Dual pixel autofocus. It's been very good. It's very sticky on the eye. I've rarely ever had it miss, and if it does, it's usually in very like low lit situations. But it's very reliable, and I think the A7s III is equally as reliable too.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I think Fuji's done a lot of good work with their autofocus recently as well. And we're getting to, apart from Panasonic, which their autofocus is not good, terrible. Sorry, there just is. Like I've used, even I went into a camera shop and tried out, what are the new Panasonic ones that came out this year? Is it the S5? Is that right?
H S5. I think those are the two main ones that were released. I was excited for the S1H though. I had high hopes for it.
Yeah, I tried it out and I loved everything about it apart from the autofocus. And I think Panasonic still does the best stabilization in terms of what they're doing with their sensor, even on their full frame cameras, because a lot of the time people were thinking that the stabilization is so good because they're only stabilizing a small micro four thirds sensor, but still great. But we're getting off the topic. Autofocus. Most camera companies are pushing a really good autofocus system at the moment. And it used to be that Canon with their dual pixel autofocus was the real front runner. They were really kind of the one that you could trust, right? They were doing great. Even back with the C100 Mark II, I think even the Mark I had the face tracking, right? I think.
Possibly.
And going back to like the 70D on the DSLR side, they've had really good autofocus for quite a while, and other camera companies were kind of catching up. But I think now Sony's really kind of, with their latest iteration of their autofocus system, like it's really really good. Like the eye tracking autofocus is amazing. I had a shoot recently where I was shooting with a family, so a lot of people in the frame, and yeah, I think I used autofocus 90% of the time just because I could trust it. So I could trust it to grab onto those faces and hold them there, track those eyes and make sure they were tack sharp, whatever I was shooting. So we're at a stage where I think Fuji's coming up and they're improving, but I think in terms of Canon and Sony, they just seem to be, from what I've used, they seem to be like evenly matched. I think it's fair to give them each a point for that. So
I agree.
So we're at 4-3 at the moment, and we're going to move on to our next topic, which is stabilization. Billy, how is the stabilization on the R5?
It's pretty incredible. I think what they were able to do with one of their first iterations of IBIS has been absolutely phenomenal. There's rarely ever a scenario, unless it's on a tripod, that I'm not using the IBIS system in it. I have all RF lenses, and that was kind of the one thing that I think we all wished for in the R5 that the EOS R didn't have. You know, with the lens IBIS, it was nice, but I think including having it work in tandem with the body is just kind of puts it on a whole nother level. I know there was a lot of word going out with like the wobbles and things like that, and I haven't had any of that happen on my model. I think that was kind of certain models had some issues, some didn't, but that like all new cameras, and there's going to be some issues with some of them, but I haven't had any issues like that. But I think they also included, digital IS as well. I haven't used it personally. I haven't needed it because I like a little bit of natural motion in mine, but I think they did an excellent job with the IBIS, and it's definitely up there.
Yeah, and the initial problems that some users were reporting with the IBIS was using very wide angle lenses, right? Was that was what people were, and you haven't found that in your testing?
I haven't. I use my 15 to 35 almost daily, and I haven't found too much, if any, wobble at all. I haven't noticed it in any of the videos that I've been shooting. Maybe it's different for other people, but that's just my personal experience.
Yeah, and on the A7s III side, so for people that don't know, Sony has had IBIS in their cameras for a little while. So the A7S, so the A7 III had IBIS in it. The A7R4 had IBIS in it, but they were kind of not that great. They kind of took those big shakes out of the footage, but they weren't very good at kind of making it look almost like like a cinema rig with a lot of weight on it. So for people that don't know, if you're looking for kind of more stable shots, you want to add weight to your rig. So whether that be batteries, extra weight, monitor, anything to kind of make it weigh more, because if it weighs more, then your body's having to do less of these micro adjustments, which make the footage less stable. So that's historically what Sony were doing. And then on the A7s III, I don't know if it's the same stabilization system from the A7 III. I've used the A7 III. It looks fairly similar. So I think the standard stabilization isn't amazing. It takes the big movements out, but it doesn't really stabilize those micro jitters. So Sony does have an active mode, but it crops in slightly. That's not a big deal for me because I'm not really in any situations where I'm just like, I need that 24. I'm using on a 24-70 most of the time. I'm not in any situations where I'm like, I really need that 24mm without a crop, but it's something to consider. I think the active stabilization with the main stabilization makes it good and it makes it look quite nice. But I think the fact that the R5 just gives you a better stabilization out of the gate without needing to go into that digital stabilization again, I think gives it the edge. Wouldn't you agree, Billy?
Yep, I agree.
Cool. So we're 4-4 at the moment. And this wasn't planned, by the way. Me and Billy didn't sit down and say we need to make sure all these numbers tally up. This is literally based on our discussion today. And we haven't got it in our notes, but I think we should probably discuss it, and that's lens selection, because during our discussion you brought up RF lenses, and they're doing a lot of really innovative things over there with the RF lenses. But I think, we should just touch on the lens selection, and because that's a consideration when you go into a new camera system. What is the lens selection like? What kind of things can you shoot with it? Do you have fast primes? Do you have really good zooms? So Billy, just talk a little bit about your experience. You said you've got all RF lenses. Do you use EF lenses with it as well, with an adapter?
Yeah, I definitely love all of my RF lenses. I kind of got into the game thinking I had heard from a lot of my mentors that, you date your bodies, but you marry your lenses. So I kind of took that to heart when going into which brand I was going to go. I was in a unique situation that I didn't have any previous glass or camera wear that I had to take into consideration when I was looking at the R5 and the A7s III. So I was really kind of open to whichever way I wanted to go. But I knew that the RF glass, in my opinion, was superior to Sony G Master just in the way that they designed them and the pricing. I know they can both be fairly expensive, but I just had seen examples of the technology and the data rates that you can use with RF glass. I didn't own any EF glass. I've used maybe 1 or 2 loaners, and the adapter has been fantastic, but I definitely love how the RF glass looks. It's very pricey, but if you want a good image, the lens kind of has a very big impact, if not so more than the body and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and there's one particular lens I wanted to talk to you about, and I hope you've got it. Is it the 28-70, the f2 one?
Yep, the f2 to the 28-70. That one I do not have. I'm trying to figure out whether I want to go with the 28 or the 24-70. The next one on my list is going to be probably a prime, so I'm probably going to go with the 85-1.2 or maybe the 50-1.2. I think I've got my bag here right here actually. My most recent one
amazing
was the 70-200.
And it's tiny.
It is tiny, isn't it? It's like the size
for a
of
70-200, yeah.
It's like very minute. It's got, obviously the zooms and things like that that have definitely given it a lot more space in my bag. Weather sealing's all right. Obviously, if you have like zooms and things like this, it's not going to have as good weather sealing as others. But just the fact that it can, you can have a 70-200 in this kind of body at a 2.8 with active stabilization modes has been. It's one of my go-to lenses, especially for weddings and other things like that.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Billy, but for me, I'm always looking at ways that I can downsize my kit. You can't do it a lot with kind of lighting because the modifiers and the lights are always going to be quite big. But with camera gear, I'm always looking at So for people that don't know, I shot on a C200 before the A7s III, and I loved the camera, great camera, but I decided to downsize just because the A7s III provided me with a more compact body and kind of the lenses were smaller. But like you said, the 70-200 on the RF is just so small, it's so portable. It looks like, for people that don't know, 70-200 lenses, particularly f2.8 lenses, are typically massive and take up a huge amount of space in your bag. So Billy, is that what you're kind of thinking about? Are you kind of considering the weight and the size of the lenses as well?
Yes and no. I try and go for quality with my lenses in terms of weight. I usually don't mind lugging things around. It's good to get me out of the house and look at some weight around. But and usually most of the shoots I go to, I'm on site and can kind of switch things out as need be. I'm not really traveling too much. The only time where it's gotten a little much is on the long wedding days, when heavier lenses that have a lot of glass, like these RF lenses, can get a little heavy. But as long as you kind of manage it properly, I think I use a hold fast harness for my weddings now. It gets a little heavy, but it's nothing that, it's worth it to me. I wouldn't mind it.
So is that a belt system, or is it kind of more of the
Yeah, no, it's a harness system. So it's got two straps that kind of fit around and cross around to your back, and it's got two little leather lanyards that kind of hang down to the side. I was a little bit nervous when I first bought it if it was gonna fit right. I had heard a lot of the quality about them, but I love it. It's kind of my go-to for weddings, and whenever I'm using dual camera setups, manages the weight really nicely.
Yeah, I recently got a think tank belt system. So it's got all of the pouches for the different lenses. It's got built-in rain covers for everything, and you put it on, you look like a massive dork. But they look like it's worth it for the usability, just being able to. And I bought it thinking that things would go back to normal quicker than they have. So kind of my thinking was for events, when you're out and about and you're changing lenses constantly, you want something with easy access, right? So but we've gone a little bit off topic. We were talking about lenses. So on the Sony side, it's easily done, but on the Sony side, the Sony lens lineup has grown so much over the past few years. You've got some great options. You've got the standard trinity of lenses, the 16-35, 24-70, and 70-200, all at f2.8. They're really good. They're also really innovating in some really great wide-angle lenses. So you've got the 12-24, which looks really good. You've also got some kind of wider primes, which are really pushing things out a little bit. So you've got 24 1.4, which is an amazing lens. I don't own it, but I have used it. Amazing lens. Just being able to get that separation on a 24mm lens is amazing. But I think in this category we're going to have to give it to the R5, just because you've got access to those amazing new RF glass, and you've also got access to maybe the biggest lens lineup ever, potentially, the EF glass, because the autofocus system works pretty much natively right on the RF lenses with EF glass.
Yep.
Yeah, so the fact you've got the RF lenses and the EF lenses working natively, I think we're going to have to give the edge to the R5. So in our final topic, the R5 just pulls ahead with 5 points to 4. So interesting. Like I said, me and Billy didn't kind of discuss these points beforehand. We didn't kind of say that we wanted one of them to win. We both kind of went into it with open minds, really, and kind of just wanting to learn more about both systems. So if we're going to say the hybrid of the year, we're going to have to say it's the Canon R5. But Billy, do you want to say a little bit about what the R5 is good at and where hybrid shooters might find it limiting?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for these cameras are built for two different people. I think if you're looking for a straight hybrid camera, the R5 is definitely the way to go. If you do mostly photo, I think it's still a perfect camera for you. And if you get into video a little bit later, it'd be really nice. I think for video, obviously the A7s III is the way to go for any primary video shooter. That's really important. If you shoot primarily video, and that's kind of where you're looking to go in the future, if you want to do streaming, promotion, anything like that, and you want to have an easy kind of way to get in and have a lot of variation with the low light, obviously for video, A7s III is the way to go. But if you're doing anything photo, more specifically related, or if you do both like me, I think the R5 definitely makes a good camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, even though based on our scoring, the R5 has come out as the better hybrid camera, don't think that if you get the A7s III, it's not a great hybrid camera, because it is, but it's just a lot better at video. So for what I do, I'm a videographer first, and I do some photo. And if the world is moving in the direction of video being so important with the pandemic, everyone's streaming, everyone's kind of putting out video content, marketing content, videos becoming more and more important. And some of the statistics you see on kind of YouTube viewership over the pandemic has just gone through the roof. So video is arguably more important in marketing terms. So I think, you can't go wrong with either of them. And with the way the world's going, the A7s III for me is still the better option. But in terms of, if you're looking at things holistically as a 50-50 hybrid camera, then the R5 makes more sense. But I don't think you can go wrong with either of these cameras, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, like I said, if you do anything more primarily video, the main takeaway is A7s III by far. If I could start fully, we talked about this a little bit before the show, but if I was to start completely over, had everything returned to me at full price, and could kind of buy my gear straight out, I would probably go with the A7s III, just because that's what I was initially waiting for when I was buying my cameras. The R5 had kind of come out, and we were all under the impression of the specs that it was going to have, and it kind of checked off a lot of boxes for me. And I was originally going to go with the A7s III, but it was kind of it was a ghost story. I had been waiting for it for a couple of years, and the minute it came out, that's the way I was going to go. But I gotta pay the bills, had to get kind of working in the R5, and the EOS R was kind of the only thing in that category that I had available to me. But the way I kind of gauge it is A7s III is built for video, R5 is built for photo. So obviously they're going to win in each category that way. So in terms of which is a better hybrid, it's going to come down to which camera does the other side better. And I think the R5 kind of does video better than the A7s III does photo better. So that's the only, I think a lot of people get stuck up that, oh, it's the better camera. No, it's the better hybrid camera for things to do both. But in terms of just video, A7s III hands down.
Yeah, so I think if we can leave you with that thought of kind of, you shouldn't feel bad if you've got either of the cameras. 2020's been a crazy year for cameras. We've had so many cinema cameras have been redefined this year with the release of the C70 on the Canon side and the FX6 on the Sony side. So now kind of traditionally a cinema camera would be seen as something that's kind of at least £10,000, $10,000 if not more, right? Whereas now we're seeing these cheaper cinema cameras that are still very, very capable, like the FX6, the C70. They're really tiny. The marketing shots don't do them justice. So you've got the FX6, which is like this, and there's the C70, which is not even that much bigger than a DSLR. So crazy year for camera. The world's obviously gone crazy, but it's been great for cameras, and I just wish as professionals we had more money to spend on cameras this year, but you can't have it all. But Billy, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to hear your thoughts on the R5.
Thanks, I really appreciate being on. Is there anyone that maybe in the chat that has questions for us?
Yeah, please drop them below before we wrap up. David's got a question here. He said the 24mm 1.4 is such a delicious look, like cutting your subject out of the soft background with a razor blade. I like that analogy. Yeah. I haven't, like I said, I don't own the Sony 24 1.4, but I've used it in a rental job, and it's weird because you're not used to 24mm lenses looking like that, or even 24mm is typically something that you'd see on a zoom lens. Most of the stuff you see on 24 is probably on a 24 to 70, right, which is f2.8. So that's kind of the look of 24mm that people are used to, and also similarly, because most camera phones on their on their main camera, I think, is like an equivalent 26. So it's not far off 24. So people are used to seeing 24 mil field of view, and it's pretty much the widest field of view you can get without it kind of distorting the image, right? So if you go down to 16 or anything lower than 24, you start to get really bad distortion in the wide angle. So yeah, that 24 1.4 looks incredible. Is there something on the Canon side?
I'm really excited to see what Sigma does with all their lenses coming out with at least for the R5 with an RF mount kind of still gaining some traction. I'm waiting for some of their lenses to kind of come out, but I'm really excited to see kind of what Sigma does for both Sony and Canon going in the future. I think they've got a lot for anyone of either side. You know, if we're just like talking straight lenses, if you don't exactly have the money for R5 or for RF lenses or maybe G Master lenses, I think Sigma is like probably one of my top contenders for people that are kind of, you know, they spend too much on their bodies, so they don't have too much to spend on the lenses. But I think Sigma is going to be putting out a lot of great stuff coming out in 2021.
Yeah, I'd have to go grab my Sigma lens because I'm actually in love with this lens. So yeah, like you said, like you've got the Canon L series on the Canon side and the Sony GM on the Sony side, which are kind of their top spec lenses. But Sigma are really because Sigma before they were affordable, but the build quality wasn't quite there, and the autofocus performance wasn't always as good as native lenses. But in the last kind of year or two, maybe 3 years, Sigma's really stepped up their game. So on like the crop sensor Canon side, so like the C200, C300 Mark III, you've got the Sigma 18 to, my mind's gone blank, it's 18 to 35, isn't it? Yeah, 18 to 35. Yeah, which is incredible. Like that's it gives you that kind of f2.8 equivalent look, and it's really sharp, it's really well built. And then like on the Sony side, so this is the Sigma 24 to 70 f2.8. And before I jumped into the Sony system, I kind of looked at the Sony G Master lens, and was kind of considering, should I go for the Sony G Master or the Sigma? And based on a few of the reviews, like the Sigma produces very similar, if not identical, results in terms of autofocus, sharpness, everything like that. If anything, I think it's too sharp, so I always have a black Pro Mist on the front. But yeah, I think Sigma is really one to watch, and Tamron as well. Like on the Sony side, they're doing some great things. What is Tamron like on the Canon side?
I haven't used any Tamron lenses. I haven't had the pleasure of giving it a shot. I've heard really good. I want to say they newly released a couple lenses, and I know a lot of photographers that have specific lenses of specific Tamron lenses that they love using. So I haven't had a chance to use any specific Tamron lenses, but I think if you're kind of looking for third-party lenses, I think I would either go for Sigma or Tamron. I think they're definitely higher quality than a lot of other things that you could find online.
Yeah, David said Sigma's killing the game optically. Their lenses are used on Top Gun 2. I didn't know that. Wow, that's cool. Yeah. Are you a big Top
really
Gun
ready
fan?
for any movie at this point. Like that's kind of really what I did in most of my free time when I was in college a few years ago, and doing whatever. I'm ready for these theaters to open up. I'm ready to see all the content that they have ready to spill out into the world.
Yeah, I really miss cinemas, to be honest. I was just speaking to my fiance, and it's funny how quickly you get used to this new normal, isn't it? So like you're kind of used to not going out to the pub and not going out to the cinema, and like beforehand I used to go there to the cinema quite often because we've got this great cinema in London. If you're in London, Peck and Plex, when things open up again, £5 a film, any time of the week, any day, amazing. But yeah, I used to go so often, and you can't beat that kind of emotional, the emotional touch of kind of seeing things in the cinema, getting that big screen experience, getting that emotion from the audience, right?
Right.
And it's I miss it.
Oh goodness, what time is it? I'm trying to remember, because I know we have a super different time frames to you being in London, but No, I loved. This was really fun. I really enjoyed everyone coming to the chat and listening and engaging with us. I'd love to hear from everyone going forward, and obviously they can contact either of us if they have any questions.
Yeah, and thanks so much for joining us, Billy. It's been great to hear your perspective. If you're up for it, I'd like to have you on again. I'm doing these shows every Friday, so if you're not subscribed, go and subscribe and hit the bell icon, because I'll be going live every Friday. This is actually the last one of this year, so Billy, it's been great that you could join us on the last one. We're going to be starting again, I think, January the 1st. We've got a very, very special guest coming on who's going to talk about, looking forward at what we want to see from cameras in 2021, what kind of features, because, cameras already seem like they've got everything right now. So what can 2021 possibly give us? But yeah, we're going to be looking forward to that. And Cogmission says, thank you, Billy and Jack. Well, thank you for watching, Cogmission. It's been amazing to have you here. And yeah, tune in, make sure you're subscribed. Billy, thank you so much, and take care, and Merry Christmas to everybody and a Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care, guys. Bye.